So we've been thinking a lot about the inside, right? About who the boy is, how to foster his relationships, how to form his virtues, how to relate with him as he grows. We've been thinking about his mind, what's going on in the mind of the typical adolescent. This is the point of the afternoon where we're going to look outwards a bit to see what are the forces outside of our homes that are pressing in on us. And then we're going to look at the barriers that many Heights families have set up to try to keep those forces as much as possible away from their boys. Now, a caveat before I get into that, there is no amount of filtering, there is no router, there is no feature phone, there's nothing that you can buy to make your home completely, quote unquote, safe. It's not out there. And so everything that you heard from Colin is of the utmost importance. Filling our homes with beauty, deepening our relationships with our sons, those are the most important things imaginable. And everything else that we're going to talk about right now, very important, right? You can't just let the wolf into where the sheep are sleeping, but not sufficient by any stretch. So there are two sections to this brief conversation. The first is just a general state of the union on technology. As we look out beyond the walls of our homes, what do we see? And in particular, I could speak for days, right? Any of us could, about the good things that are happening in tech. We have relatives that have been helped, healed. We have relationships that have been facilitated, travel that we engage in all the time. There's so much good stuff that happens because of tech. So again, there are good things in the technological sphere, but I think it's important for us to think in some way today about some of the challenges that technology is currently presenting our boys. So we'll do that, and I'm going to try to limit myself to 10 to 15 minutes. And then the rest of our time together will be spent basically discussing some of the ways that Heights parents, many Heights parents who have been just an incredible help to me as a dad, how we as Heights parents oftentimes protect our boys. In some ways, you could almost call this, just the results of a survey of sorts of imperfect parents who are trying hard and usually succeed in some way, shape, or form, even if it takes 40 years to do so. So this is, imperfect, but it is, as you survey the community, as you see kind of, all right, who are the boys that seem to be using their technology well, not just in high school, but in college and beyond. These are some of the practices that we've gleaned from those families. Some of these practices are also informed by conversations with teachers. We have a head of mentoring who's been in that position for 30 years. So his conversations have been invaluable as well. Okay, first for social media. Are there good uses in the world of social media? Absolutely. I guess I would encourage us to ask ourselves, but are those uses actually what the machines are built for, right? What is the point of social media? And some do argue that the point of social media is to maximize your time on site, to capture as much of your attention as humanly possible. I've talked to people who used to work at Facebook, and there was a huge board, one person in particular told me about, where they actually were showing the minutes per user on average that those individuals were spending on the site. And every time those things crept up, there was a bit of a cheer in the room. Right, so that's the perspective that we should view this through. Yes, you can communicate with your grandparents through Facebook. Yes, you can do all sorts of really great things. But if you look at the inside of many of these companies, that is what they're after, your attention. Okay, so as it relates to our boys, I'm trying to be as impartial and just even-keeled as possible as we talk about this stuff. Much of what I'll share with you has just been in the news the last couple of weeks. But new developments in social media, we know just more and more is happening to help us understand how difficult social media can be for the mental health of our children. I think many of us who just kind of kept our eyes open have seen this coming for a while, but it seems that governments are finally starting to take this seriously. One of the new developments in social media is the development of generative AI, which is now being leveraged to not only capture your son's attention, but actually to know him better in some ways than he knows himself, to know his likes and his dislikes, and then not only to know him, but also to engage him in conversation using whatever personality the AI knows by seeing his scrolling history he wants to engage with, right? So if my son happens to get on Meta or something like that, he could have he could have a conversation with a digital Jurgen Klopp, who is Liverpool's soccer coach, about whatever. So this is a new world, right? This is not just me posting pictures and being liked or followed. Particularly difficult in this regard is TikTok. A video investigation by the Wall Street Journal, just quote this article, found that TikTok only needs one important piece of information to figure out what a user wants: the amount of time you linger over a piece of content. Every second you hesitate or rewatch, the app tracks you. Through that one powerful signal, TikTok can learn your most hidden interests and emotions and drive users of any age deep into rabbit holes of content in which feeds are heavily dominated by videos about a specific topic or theme. It's an experience that other social media companies like YouTube have struggled to stop. All the problems we have seen on YouTube, and this is a quote, are due to engagement-based algorithms, and on TikToks, it's exactly the same, but it's worse, said a former YouTube engineer who worked on TikTok's algorithm and is now an advocate for transparency in how companies use those tools. That's actually a very common thing to see former engineers flipping onto the side of consumer advocacy. So let's go to TikTok a bit deeper. TikTok serves our children just endless series of short videos, known in some circles as kink top because of the difficult nature of much of that content. TikTok's parent company, ByteDance, which is headquartered in China, actually has, it's an interesting fact, a separate version of TikTok called Douyin that serves up educational videos by default to many of our counterparts across the Pacific. Our own children here receive a very different type of content. Perhaps even more troubling than that is the fact that TikTok is now one of the top search engines for more than half of Generation Z. Imagine going to TikTok to find out what is happening in downtown DC. And this may be part of the reason why 51% of Americans aged 18 to 24 believe that Hamas's October 7 attacks were justified. This is not speaking to whether or not there should be a two-state solution. This is not speaking to whether or not whatever policies on one side or the other of that very difficult, complex matter, not speaking to that at all, but just speaking to whether or not the actual acts on October the 2nd were justified. And if 51% of Americans aged 18 to 24 believe that they were. And much of that has to be because of where they're getting their news and how. The House and the Senate recently took bipartisan action to ban TikTok on federal phones. Part of this is because TikTok, which has also been referred to NSA to go, is engaging in all sorts of monitoring our content that's very troubling. Australia, Canada, EU have all enacted similar bans. India has banned the app altogether. And if you'd like to learn more about the rabbit holes that our 13 to 15-year-olds can go down, then do check out this Wall Street Journal article that I'm happy to share with you if you email me. But a quote from that article is an analysis of the videos served to these fake accounts that the Wall Street Journal set up, found that through its powerful algorithms, TikTok can quickly drive minors among the biggest users of the application into endless spools of content about sex and drugs. Meta is obviously another company that we're familiar with. Meta's a recent Economist article notes that Meta's core businesses of Facebook, Instagram, and WhatsApp in the third quarter of this year alone reported revenues of $34.1 billion, which is up 23% year on year. So that's the sharpest rise since the digital boom of the COVID-19 pandemic. Their net profits have more than doubled to $11.6 billion. Average users so obviously Meta has some core businesses, Facebook, WhatsApp, and Instagram. Among users of Instagram, which the young people are attracted to, this is an interesting statistic. Of course, if you look for statistics online, there's so many things. Just a couple of them that jumped out at me. One is that among users under the age of 16, more than, this is an interesting one, 13% had experienced unwanted sexual advances in the past 7 days, right? So this is not like over the course of their lifetime. This is days. Across the same time span, 26% recalled having a bad experience in the last week due to witnessing hostility against someone based on their race, religion, or identity. And then a separate one, more than a fifth, again, within the past 7 days, felt worse about themselves after viewing others' posts. As I said earlier, Meta has been completely open about its intention to develop its engagement of young users. It's no secret. They actually, at the board level, they're discussing their interest in attracting and engaging 18 to 24-year-olds with Gen AI avatars. That's generative AI avatars. One of these avatars, interestingly, which uses a Jane Austen voice, was interviewed, if you can do that to a computer, by a journalist. And the journalist inquired about the metaverse and the following, well, the journalist asked the AI, what is the metaverse? The answer was, it is a virtual world where people can escape reality and live their best lives. Kind of a frightening topic. So in some ways, it's almost like the question for us is, do we want our sons to stay in the real world and enter real relationships? Because it's very easy to escape that. So in that theme, again, we'll continue with generative AI. On Friday of last week, news broke that boys in New Jersey, in a New Jersey school, were sharing fake images of female classmates generated by AI. These images were, of course, wildly inappropriate, and I'll leave it at that. But what's interesting to me is that's not at all surprising. It's expected, it's disappointing, but it's not surprising if you really think about it. But some of the other statistics that I saw in that article were surprising. According to the Wall Street Journal, the overwhelming majority of faked images are pornographic. They said 90% of those that are faked. And true to form, a quick search by these Wall Street Journal journalists, not yours truly, revealed dozens of companies that offer face swapping or clothes removal tools. I don't think any of us are surprised if we've been paying attention. Now, of course, Snapchat, where many of these images were shared, has declared its commitment to work with authorities on these images. It's very, very good of them. But do we really believe that these efforts are going to be effective when law enforcement and child safety experts consistently name Snapchat within the top 3 most dangerous platforms for children, according to the National Center on Sexual Exploitation? Snapchat itself is very, very difficult to monitor. As you know, it's premised around this idea that you can share an image and then it disappears. And so it's kind of a difficult thing. One, because of the content that's there. It's an incredible amount of pornography lives on Snapchat, including actual vendors and providers of that. It's also difficult because it creates in our children a false sense of security, that I can send an image and it's okay if it's on Snapchat because it's going to disappear. But the reality is that it doesn't. It can be screen captured, downloaded, and it continued to be shared. It's also extremely difficult to monitor Snapchat and to protect your children on Snapchat. Experts who are trying to help us do this recommend actually going onto the app and adjusting and actually liking things or disliking things so you can train the AI that's trying to serve your son to do so in a manner that you think is appropriate. So again, just to reiterate, we're encouraged to enter our son's Snapchat accounts and like certain things or dislike certain things so that the AI that's responsible for offering your son a curated set of content will only give your son what you want him to see. And you can imagine how difficult that becomes. Oftentimes when we think of social media, we think of these companies, but I think it's important to kind of expand that view. Some of these images from New Jersey were also shared in group chats, which leads me to the next point. And here I'll cite an Atlantic article that is, I think it's about a week old, but I will quote here, "Group chats are the most social of all social media." So in a sense, group chats are social media, depending on how you're using them. One of our youngest Heights teachers, a favorite of his students and his colleagues alike, when I asked him about this stuff, he described group chats in the following way. He said, essentially, they're digital brothels. You can be in there and not sin, but do you really want to be in there? It's an unsupervised 24-hour sleepover. It's a field trip to nowhere without faculty and complete access to the internet. So those can be very difficult places depending on how they're structured and how they're monitored. Finally, we have the devices. And I promise we'll get more positive in a second, but we've got to understand the outside before we can talk about the inside, right? Protect yourself against what? I don't know, but protect yourself. So this is what we're protecting ourselves from. The devices, what else, how do our boys sometimes get in trouble? Yes, be very careful about the iPhone, of course, but don't forget that, the Kindle, that's just, you've had it for a million years and you forgot all about it. That can be a source of difficulty. Don't forget the Internet of Things, which is now gracing so many of our devices, which formerly had nothing to do with the World Wide Web. So many of these devices now have screens. Our sons can get into trouble on treadmills And even the refrigerator can now be an access point to the most difficult content. So it is an occasion of sin in more than one way now. I would encourage all of us to just, think twice about our notion that we've locked down our cell phone. Many have locked down cell phones. But if Messenger is still allowed, if you hop into the GIF section of the texts, it's very easy to pull up some very difficult content. Many of us have given our children iPhones so that they can use maps because maybe they're driving. If you go to certain locations in maps, you can enter certain establishments that cater to an older clientele, and their pictures that have been taken by other patrons will appear on your son's map. So lots of different things to be aware of with the iPhone. Finally, just a quick word. I'm flying as fast as I can because there's so much better, more beautiful stuff to talk about. But the content that our sons are accessing is difficult. Video games we're not going to talk very much about. I would encourage you to read this book, Glow Kids, which is by an internationally renowned addiction expert, so from a very secular perspective. But it's got a lot of great studies and all the rest of it, Glow Kids. But the quote from that book that jumped out to me, video game playing directly or indirectly disrupts the development of preferable neural systems related to the development of verbal intelligence. And there are so many quotes and so many studies that are of interest, I think, to us. Finally, a quick word about pornography, not about what our sons are thinking or how to accompany them, which we all have to do, but just in general, what's going on in that space. Obviously, the content is difficult. But now it's important for us to know as parent that 27% of video content on the internet is pornographic. So a wonderful gentleman by the name of Chris McKenna, who runs an organization called Protect Young Eyes, which you should all check out. He comments in a video that it's almost as if there were 4 magazines on the table, and one of those is pornography. And then we put a little magic box full of those magazines right into our son's pocket. So unsupervised internet is a very difficult place to be. And I think it's material enough to mention it here, although I'm reticent to do so, that this is not the type of content that's been around forever. An analysis of the 50 most popular pornography videos found that 88% contained physical violence, 49 contain verbal aggression. So this is very difficult content. Psychologically, the impact is very real. But as I wind this cheery section down, I do want to point out a quote that made me happy. Even people who plunge into addiction for years can emerge from that shallow madness, retrain and rewire their brains, and rediscover real intimacy. Hope is always possible, and God is so good. Finally, the physical and neurological health. In May 2023, the Surgeon General came out with a warning. He said that we are experiencing an epidemic of loneliness. So part of that Surgeon General's warning was the following: be attentive to how young people spend their time online, delay the age at which children join social media platforms, and monitor and decrease screen time in favor of positive, in-person, connection-building activities. That's wonderful, but one is left thinking, gosh, this is a little bit too little, too late. Of course, it's never too late, but I wonder where this was a few years ago, and many people already saw this coming. Also, it's interesting to see this Thursday a front-page Wall Street Journal article highlighting the fact that our ERs are being filled with children needing mental health treatment. Children's Hospital reports a 20% increase since 2019 in mental health visits to their hospitals. We are heartened to see that there is now increased congressional interest in Meta, finally, and 42 attorneys general are suing Meta over their pattern or their practice of trying to hook and addict young people. This lawsuit is not necessarily related to the type of content, right? As a society, we're very reticent to talk about content types because of our much love, for good reason, First Amendment, but just the fact of how addicted these young people are to Instagram is what is motivating this lawsuit by 42 attorneys general. When is the last time we saw 42 attorneys general agree about anything? 42. Now, of course, Meta's stock price declined a little bit, but you'll be happy to hear that's back up above where it was when the attorneys general announced their lawsuit. Other things that are interesting, social media companies now are at least trying to pay lip service to child protection. And very interestingly, schools in England are engaging in the groundbreaking practice of banning smartphones in schools. So that's interesting. But that is the world on the outside. So as we can see, when we talk about things like social media, which Alvaro is I think is right on and encouraging us to be careful with the language that we use. Are we talking about phones or are we talking about a supercomputer? Are we talking about social media or are we talking about machines that are run on AI that are calculated to captivate our interest and our attention so they can advertise to us? Very different things. Okay, setting all that aside, that's the world outside, right? That's us looking that way. Let's turn around and look in.